We asked you to come on to speak about what's happening with reproductive rights. So let me tell the audience, what's happening here. Heidi Sieck is a co-founder and chief empowerment officer of Vote Pro Choice. It's a national political engagement platform that I'm sure everyone watching ACT.TV already knows about because it is one of our sister organizations. The organization connects pro-choice voters with pro-choice champions in critical elections. Heidi is an award-winning civic entrepreneur, proud partner of the Women's March on Washington, and a member of the policy table responsible for writing the intersectional unity principles. Heidi, thanks for joining us on the program today.
Oh, I'm always happy when you ask me.
Well, can we talk about some of the recent updates on reproductive rights? We've had some exciting court decisions at the state level and also in the Supreme Court. Your thoughts about what's going on?
Well, I always appreciate it when you ask me to come on to the show, Juliana. And I first want to say to everyone who is listening, if you identify as a man, a non-binary person, a trans person, a woman, this conversation is for you. Because what we're talking about is reproductive freedom, and that is a foundational issue that undergirds everything about freedom. It's very much a thing that has been pushed into the sideline as a women's issue or an abortion issue. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about who gets to control your decisions about your body, and that is for everybody. So that let's just start there.
I've noticed the right wing are starting to co-opt some of these messages like my body, my choice, no mask, but yet they're fine with, my body, not my choice, forced pregnancy.
Yeah. And we're starting to see a lot of the issues, the systemic issues in our society bubble up now during this pandemic, racism, economic injustice. We also get to see the insidious nature of control of reproductive freedom and fertility. And that's what we've been watching for the last 40 years. So start with the baseline. Roe v. Wade is just a baseline. It is a decision that was handed down in 1973 that says you can't ban abortion in America. But for the last 40 years, the anti-choice elected officials, the religious right, the conservative minority of people in this country have done their damn best to try to chip away access. And we are now at like the zenith, nadir abyss of watching all of that investment in infrastructure come to fruition. So we had we had a Supreme Court decision that was about a TRAP law, which is targeted restriction on abortion provider laws that have been the fan favorite of conservative state legislatures for decades.
And don't they recognize that TRAP is an acronym that gives away the whole negative notion of the thing? I mean, not to point out something that doesn't matter really, but yeah. Seriously, they like calling it the murder law or,
and they're really, the messaging stuff is really, you'll notice it's messages like a heartbeat bill, or it used to be, the first one was the partial birth abortion bill. These things are not real. Like it's not medical term. They're not real medical terms. There is no heartbeat at 6 weeks. It's just messaging. And so the Born Alive bill, I think, is the one that's happening now. So
oh yeah, that's
the legislation that have been passed forever. And so it's happening all the time. So like the one that happened last week, Iowa passed a piece of TRAP legislation that was a waiting period. I think it was a 24-hour waiting period. Those are very, very common. They want to, conservative state legislatures want to make a person who wants to go in to consider an abortion wait long periods of time. And particularly when you have people who have to travel hundreds of miles to get access to care. That wait is a huge issue because it increases the access, increases how long you might have to stay in a hotel. It increases how much you might have to drive, how much time you have to take off from work, etc. It's a just insidious TRAP law.
It's like a tax, right?
Totally. So Iowa legislature passed this waiting period like in the dead of night without any debate and the governor signed it. And so thankfully there's a court that stopped it from being enacted, and then Planned Parenthood sued. It's like what happens every day. It's like every day in the life of reproductive freedom fighters for the last 30 years. And I'm just really glad that people are starting to know that this has been happening. And it's these insidious little pieces, like these little chipping away that you can't really see. But now that we're starting to get the full picture, and what happens when these laws are enacted by conservative legislatures and they get enjoined by local courts. And side note, realize that all of these decisions are being made by elected officials at the state and local level. So we're going to get back to that, including elected judges. They end up kind of evolving their ways through the court system, hit the federal courts that are just jam-packed full of Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell approved conservative judges, and then they get to the Supreme Court, which is what we have been seeing lately. So about 16 cases are sitting there waiting for the Supreme Court, but now the Supreme Court has considered two. They decided one last week that was basically another trap law that was focused in Louisiana. That did not actually get enacted. So we can talk more about that. And then there's another one coming up next week, which basically will allow your boss to decide if you get access to birth control and your health insurance or not.
Okay.
So, yes.
So they're really trying at the state and local level to undermine and to get something up to the Supreme Court to overturn Roe v. Wade is really the point. Were you surprised at the most recent Supreme Court judgment where, they upheld precedent?
No, I mean, it's precarious. With John Roberts, it's always precarious because what he's been doing.
He's the Susan Collins of the Supreme Court. Yes.
What you can see that he's always done, and Kavanaugh actually did this in one of the previous decisions about abortion rights last term. What they're doing is they are, in their decisions, they're writing little explanations to the anti-choice movement about, oh, you didn't do it right, Fifth Circuit. So this is what I want to see. So this particular decision was just a straight up like repeat of precedent that had already been decided 4 years before. And so John Roberts, and what was great is that we saw a lot of the women, Elena Kagan, Sonia Sotomayor, throughout the entire term of the Supreme Court this cycle, have been joining the conservative bloc on the Supreme Court in issues of precedent to make the case. Like, look, we're joining you on issues you care about because it's precedent. And
but they're not going to do that. That's the one problem with us. We're like, right? We're going to set the tone that we're all, and then they don't do that.
Get it. So am I surprised? I'm glad. I mean, it's more like we've just been treading water for so long and now we didn't drown that day. And so, at least we didn't lose ground, but
so they're basically signaling that the next court case that should get to the Supreme Court needs to look like this in order for them to.
They needed to change at least a few words in the legislation. Like, this was the exact same legislation as a Texas case that had been previously decided by the Supreme Court. So it was John Roberts was kind of just saying, like, guys, change a sentence, I don't want to see this again. And so, thank goodness. And, you can read him, we've all read all of the articles about like John Roberts' psychology and all of that. But let me just be clear, like, we have a conservative majority on the Supreme Court right now, and they have no problem controlling reproductive freedom. They are aligned in that regard, and they'll do what they can. Now, maybe they won't overtly overturn Roe, but let's be real honest right now, just to give you a lay of the land in the country. Roe is just a very baseline. It's a baseline. It's like a minimum. It's minimum. The truth of the matter is, like, around 57% of the people in this country live in a place that is hostile to reproductive freedom. So that means, like, there are a lot of people that don't have access to basic care. And it's birth control, it's hormone therapy for trans people, it's just basic care in addition to abortion care. So that's where we're at, and we need folks to realize that.
Can you talk a little bit about, we on some of our platforms get pushback from people who say that the two parties are the same. And in this issue, it is really that the two parties are absolutely diametrically opposed. Can you talk about that? Because I always like to disabuse people from that. They might be the same when it comes to war, but when it comes to this issue, and issues are really at home and tangible. This is a woman's ability, not just to choose, but to have health care. It's basically a woman's ability to have health care
Well,
on some level.
Juliana, it's even more insidious than that. This is a fundamental worldview of does government control a body and a body part, and this impacts everyone. It's not just a woman. It's every individual who has ever interacted with someone who is able to have a child.
Mm.
And anyone that's a daughter, that's your sister, that's your trans brother or non-binary niece or nephew, that's you. If you're a man and you are sexually active heterosexually, this is you. I mean, this impacts you. So, and it impacts your future, and it impacts our economic decisions, and it impacts our personal body autonomy and freedom. Period. And the Republican Party does believe that the government has a role in controlling these very fundamental decisions.
Mm.
They believe that this should be regulated. They believe that the things that happen in a doctor's office, with a family, with a person, with a pregnant person, should be regulated by the state, the courts, the Supreme Court, Congress, and the president. That is fundamental worldview difference, and it's also an issue of freedom and control. So what do you believe what do you believe about that? And you vote that way. So, and it's impacted at every level of government.
We're speaking with Heidi Sieck, the co-founder and CEO of Vote Pro-Choice. Heidi, abortion was considered, or they were trying to consider abortion non-essential under as COVID was unfolding. Can you talk about where we are with that at this moment?
Yeah, it's super creepy. So 12.
Don't you think it's essential? I mean, it's not like, oh, I can put off this, facial surgery until next week. The baby's.
It's real creepy.
Yeah.
Now, like when you get to really see the super creepy part of this, the insidious nature of the control mindset. So we're talking 12 states in their COVID disaster declarations, meaning what the governors have to pass in order to trigger access to emergency funds at the federal level. Articulate in those disaster declarations, you articulate what's an essential service. And 12 states, Alaska, Alabama, Arkansas, Indiana, Iowa, Louisiana, Mississippi, Ohio, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Texas, and West Virginia all said that abortion was not essential. So that means that a pregnant person has to wait. And what does that mean? Like, because of the situation in our states and the limitations that are put on reproductive freedom in this country, you might have to wait until after you are legally able to obtain abortion services. That means you are stuck. They were not forcing us to stay home. They're not forcing us to wear masks. They were forcing us to stay pregnant. And that is just creepy. So those bans essentially are lifted now, but we still have all the other weird little chipping away, like the Iowa action. I mean, since 2019, there's been like hundreds of pieces of legislation that have been introduced, dozens that have been enacted. We've got trigger bans that will ban abortion in 8 states if Roe is overturned. I mean, it's just it's a mess. And again, the point I want to make here is who's making these decisions. These are local and state elected officials. These are folks like governors, secretaries of state, attorneys general, state legislatures, sometimes mayors. These are sheriffs, district attorneys, judges. They are folks that we elect at the local level, and we never ask the questions of, what do you think about reproductive freedom?
Mm. Yeah,
That's what we
because when you're thinking about electing a dog catcher, you just think about catching the dogs, not when they move up the chain of electoral politics
Yep.
to become something else. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we talked about it before, an agricultural commissioner in a red state is one of the top leadership development roles before you become governor. So it's like super important to know the reproductive freedom perspective of your agricultural commissioner.
It's so important to have these things pointed out. And the group Vote Pro-Choice, how can people plug in, and what kind of resources are available as we come into the, we're here, it's election season. There are primaries that happening.
Okay, friends. So let's think about what's going to happen now. So 119 days from now.
Thank God, that seems like a manageable number. I can make it till that. I'm glad you have the number. Okay, that made me feel a little better. Go ahead. Sorry.
From now, we have to vote in the middle of a global pandemic. In 50 states, all the territories, and DC. There are 95,000 races on the ballot that are going to be on the ballot. And we have to vote in every single one of them. A lot of people will vote for the president or not vote for the president, and then they won't finish their whole ballot. It's super important that we do that. So, okay, get ready to vote, make a plan to vote, get your ballots out, get your ballots ready, and know when your mail-in ballots are going to be, when you have to apply for a mail-in ballot. Just make a plan. Right.
Greg Palast encouraged everyone to make sure they are registered now, because even if you just voted in the primary, they can still scrub you off the rolls in order to not have you vote in the general. So you have to check your registration.
Which conservative secretaries of state that we vote for or not.
we
all, we do vote for down our ballot, are making these decisions. They're the ones that are destroying the infrastructure of elections. So what Vote Pro-Choice has created is I think we've done about 12 or 13 of them now, but this will be our 4th national voter guide. And what we do is it's a beautiful, easy to use, mobile friendly product. You can also have it online. You can also print it out. And it basically gives you everything you need to vote in the election. It's every election on the ballot. And you can see everybody that's going to be on your ballot, and you can see their stances through the lens of progressive issues and reproductive justice, which is way more than abortion and birth control. It's about economic justice. It's about access to healthcare. It's about immigrant rights. It's about perspectives of racism. It's all of it. You're going to get a picture of who you need to be voting for. And it's real easy to use, and you take it in, you can take the print out, your mobile phone in with you to the polls, and just prepare to vote and vote all the way down the ballot. And we're going to have that ready for you by the 1st of October, and you will want that. You will want that. In addition to providing information about where your polling place is and any vote by mail information that you might need, and the tools that you need to make a plan to vote. 119 days, we have to be voting. We have to be voting through the lens of reproductive freedom. We have to be voting through the lens of racial justice, economic justice, and we're going to try to help you do that.
Thank you so much, Heidi. Heidi Sieck, again, co-founder and CEO, Chief Empowerment Officer of Vote Pro-Choice. You can follow Heidi at Heidi Speaks on Twitter. Definitely follow Vote Pro-Choice. You don't want to not do that either.
There's a lot of great information. You can get the full picture of what's going on in the country and make the right decisions to change it.
I just thank the group and your work for doing that, because this day of information overload and just too much to follow, plus trying to protect your family from a global pandemic, and depending on which group you are, trying to protect them from the police force, trying to protect, all of these things that we're having to deal with. I think the fact that Vote Pro-Choice just makes it so easy. They just hand you what you need to know about your locals. It's just a great service. So thank you so much for doing that.
If you've ever asked, just tell me who to vote for, we have the answer for you. It's voteprochoice.us. And thank you so much, Juliana, for allowing us to talk about these really important issues and make sure that folks know that it impacts everybody. It's this one. This one's for you, my friends. This one's for you.
It's great to see you, Heidi. I'm glad you are feeling better. And it was just really, I look forward to seeing you in the human form outside the Zoom form at some point when people can get together again.
Thank you so much. Take good care, everybody.